Welcome back to the Thing Conversation. Still with me is Thabo Mokwena, the second CEO of Salga. You know, Tibos, the Constitution of South Africa states that we must recognize injustices of the past. What are those specific injustices in local government sphere? And is there a sector consensus that those are injustices? Just in local government, you have been to almost all municipalities. I can't imagine a municipality you have not been to. But what are those injustices in municipalities? And is there consensus that these are the injustices?
Well, look, I think there have been two that immediately comes to my mind. But the primary and key one, it was about how do you distribute the tax revenues. That Mathebula stays in Mamelodi. He works in Pretoria CBD. He pays taxes there, contributes, but he goes back to Mamelodi. That taxes doesn't follow him. So remember then that when even the RDP and other documents came up with one city, one tax base. So you integrate so that we put money in one pot and then we share it among, all the people who have contributed. So that was redressing the local government injustices. But the second one, it was the special planning. To say the black people will be located on the outskirts, far from the economic activities and that. And I think that to this day, it's still a challenge. I still hear people talking about apartheid special planning, apartheid special moaning about it, but what concretely it's done to reverse that particular path, it doesn't, it doesn't convince that, there has been a genuine effort to. So I think for me, those two were the key leading. I mean, there are many others, but I think central to all of these things, we thought that if we are able to integrate the townships with the city centers, we will be able to use the resources such that, we can build the roads, we can put infrastructure in the townships and then in the areas where, people live in. So we're addressing the previous injustices. But as I said, again, the biggest one, it was the special planning and making sure that people are far from where they. But 30 years down the line, we can't still be moaning and complaining about those things. We ought to have moved in a direction that begins to, close that particular gap. There has been economic development initiatives that begins to say, let's put in some viable economies into the townships, closer to where people live and what, so that, it's not glaring that
then, Thabo,
they are isolated from the economy.
But then when we do that, we then unbundle network industries, your electricity and water, which form a substantial part of where local government is able to get revenue outside the rates and taxes. We then unbundle them. We put them in the hands of the private sector. And that's a big chunk of money out of the fiscus. And you remember you were in the EDI, and that conversation was taken up about distribution. Now we're there, the municipalities are losing an ability to distribute electricity and water. What do you think this will impact on local government as a sector once you take
it? You see, Prof, and I don't want to toot my horn too much, but correctly so, I was with EDI. I was one of the board members of EDI, but I have resigned from EDI. Mm-hmm. I resigned from EDI. And the key reason why, it's because EDI, instead of implementing the mandate that we envisaged for it, they started wanting to entertain a constitutional amendment to take away the distribution powers of municipalities. And that's when, I said, this is not what, we had agreed on. That was not the philosophy. And everybody and anyone knows that the backbone of the survival of municipalities, it's collecting those electricity levies and water levies. So when you make an attempt to remove that from the constitution and remove that power from municipalities, forget municipalities. You're not going to have municipalities in this country. You're not going to have a single entity called a municipality. They're going to collapse, all of them. So that's fundamental. The current architecture and then how it's evolving, how, they are like separating ESCOM and others. Quite frankly, Dr. Mathebula, and personally I'm just tired of this because back in the early 2000s, there was a blueprint on the electricity restructuring, which was led by Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka as a Minister of Minerals and Energy. And then he spoke about these things. It was the one that led into the EDI and stuff. So what is happening now? We're going back to what we discussed back in the 2000s. So it's an implementation, but it's being dressed up in different terminology and that kind of a thing. However, for me, the most fundamental thing is that do whatever you want to do, restructure the electricity industry in whichever way that you want to restructure, but don't tamper with that revenue that sustains municipalities from the electricity, not only from the water and then other services that the municipalities are providing, because those are the financial backbones of municipalities. And once you fail with that, you're going to collapse them.
Okay. No. Thank you. The Constitution obligates me to promote economic development. Do you think municipalities can be involved in economic development?
Of course. There are many avenues where municipalities should be able to stimulate local economic development. And I think, lots of policies and papers have been written about that particular sector. But municipality own lands, massive pieces of land, which land they must leverage for purposes of economic development or business development. So if a municipality is preoccupied and just giving out land for housing and not being able to balance it with viable economies, they will miss that thing. Me and you, where we grew up, that next to Kososhanguve Roslin, a massive piece of land for industrialization and what. And that has kept, those communities going for many, many years. But those things are supposed to be stimulated by the municipalities. We have this strategic piece of land. We think we want to use it as an economic zone for ABCD. That's the one part. But the other part is that...
I just want to check something. Those are industries and manufacturing. Do you think rural municipalities are honest about agrarian development, agricultural development? Because when you read their IDPs, you see them aspiring to be Joburg and not aspiring to be, for example, Stellenbosch. If you go to Stellenbosch as a city, the bulk of Stellenbosch is wine farms and what. But why are municipalities in other rural areas not focusing on, for example, Tabazimbi could be a citrus space again. Tzanini could be, but they all want to be like Johannesburg when you read the IDP. Why is it that way?
Look, to answer your question differently, Prof, is that every time when we walk on the streets, people tell us, hey, Mabatu used to be viable. It was like doing this and that. People says Butterworth, it used to be the hub of printing, producing books and what. And by the way, immediately after 1994, Butterworth was the first municipality to collapse. So I agree with you that the ability of rural small towns to identify their competitive edge and excel in that particular competitive edge, it's a bit wanting. You know, they aspire to be bigger cities and what, but the economies are not structured that type of a way. You know, so there is, it's a leadership challenge to be able to find, you know, people who thinks in a particular strategic way and says that, okay, fine, we are in Zanini, our specialty is namune more citrus, you know, a kind of a thing. And then how do we enhance this particular economy so that it benefits our municipality? But the first thing that the municipality will do, they'll look up to provinces and national government. What are you going to do for us with respect to this?
Yeah, we left with 2 minutes, and there is this important questions I want to ask you to say, what would you characterize as the main issues impacting on local government to ensure that when we open our taps, there's water, when we switch on the lights, when we press the switch, there's light, when we flush in the bathroom, whatever we have left there goes where it's supposed to do. We don't meet it somewhere in the streets. What are those things that are making this to be difficult? We have 1 minute to do that, and then we need to close. Yeah.
Prof, for me, I think there is a general problem in the country of the ethics of our society. Not just public servants or what. You know, you go to a bank, you look at how the type of service that it's lackadaisical, you know, maybe now maybe so we need a team of municipal employees that are dedicated, that are passionate about their work, that execute their work with love for the country, but for themselves as well. So we lack that professionalism, we lack that passion, we lack the patronage to be able to say, this is our city, this is our municipality, we're going to make it work. And then it's compounded by the deficiency at the political leadership level.
Okay, that's it. And thank you, Thabo. And that brings us to the end of the conversation with Thabo Mokwena in this edition of the Thhinc Conversations. My sincere thanks to my guest, Thibos, for sharing his insights and for contributing to what we hope will be a much broader and ongoing national dialogue. This subject will be revisited. It would be ideal to hear your opinions on this issue. Until next time, I'm Lucky Mathebula.